I think two very simple questions to start with, to start weeding through, okay, what should I at least investigate and keep on my list to consider and what not, is why now and says who.
Hey guys, welcome to the Next Step podcast. Today I have with me Maartje, a seasoned speaker and executive consultant with a remarkable journey through some of the most challenging environments in the corporate world. She has over 2 decades of global experience in the oil and gas industry, and her expertise extends beyond technical prowess, but encompasses also leadership, crisis management, and my favorite, strategic planning. Her approach to leadership and problem solving is deeply influenced by her personal experiences that have tested her resilience and her adaptability, which she shares with her clients through the Chaos Games, her consulting business for entrepreneurs and leaders of large teams. Maartje, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Before we get into too much of all the things that you're doing now, I want to back up and talk about where you came from. So you were in corporate in the oil and gas industry. How did you transition into consulting? Was it a natural transition or did you like just break and start something new?
I think for me, a natural transition, the question was always more when it was going to happen and not if. I didn't necessarily chose the oil and gas industry, but I wanted a job that would take me everywhere and allow me to live everywhere.
Mhm.
And the oil and gas industry is fabulous in that it has a gazillion different careers. So you could almost be anything you would want to be. And so it allowed me lots of great opportunities and, the chance to travel and be everywhere and get high quality training, get interesting colleagues from all over the world. But ultimately, as a woman in that industry, I think in general, if you're on a high potential career path, what the company wants with you and what you want might not always align. And I think in my case, that was, or I know that got worse because I was a woman in the most male dominated part of the business. And so I said, okay, as long as I'm entertained in what I love, we're good. And when that ends, I go with plan B. So I started making a plan B probably 10 years before I actually resigned
Okay.
to kind of say to myself every time a new opportunity came up, do I want this or is this the moment where I go out? Which made the decision to leave actually quite easy.
Yeah.
But I hadn't a very firm idea of what that would look like. I just knew that I could go out on my own and that if I would leave, grass is not really greener somewhere else. So going in with another multinational was not attractive.
Gotcha. I love that you just said that the grass is not greener on the other side. Truth be told, I don't, and you correct me if I'm wrong because I've never worked corporate, but I don't necessarily know if the grass is greener as an entrepreneur either. It's just different grass, right? You're just in different terrain. And so there are people that would argue that it's better to be with that consistent corporate job. And there are people that are like, nope, like you were saying, there's a point where it doesn't serve you anymore and you want to have more control over what you do and where you do it.
Yes, and I think you build up frustrations. I always call it a backpack full of pebbles, and at some point the frustrations are too much because they don't clean out anymore. But thinking if I go to another organization that I won't have those, it's not true. And if you go to another organization, you don't have your name. And so yes, you lose your frustrations maybe if you go somewhere else and start fresh, but you also start fresh in terms of who you are and your connections and the ease with which you know how some of the basic stuff works and goes.
Yeah, you've lost your pebbles, but you've also lost all that ground the pebbles were laying on. That makes absolute sense. So I want to talk a little bit about the this chaos games that you talk about because so obviously, and I don't know exactly what you did. You'll have to give us a little more details about what you were doing when you were corporate, but I know what chaos is, and I know that every business experiences it. So tell me about that. Where did the chaos games come from? What does it entail? All those things.
Yes. So even although I joined corporate through a very rigid framework, the lady who was running it said, I love having you, but you don't fit anywhere. So from day one, I knew I was the odd one out. And I think I tried for a while to color within the lines and follow the career path and follow the ladders set out for me until at some point somebody said to me, Maartje, if that's you, then be that.
Yeah.
Color between the lines. That's how you operate. That's where you have your successes. And if you're okay that every time there's a reorg or when they try to put everybody in their
In their
boxes,
box. Mhm.
you don't fit in, and you might have a bit of extra stress and panic. The times that that's not happening, this company needs people like you. And so I realized early on that that was my happy space. And I maybe didn't articulate that straight away, but structuring chaos as my superpower has been part of my vocabulary for a long time.
Mm.
I've always loved organizing, but the messy organizing. At some point, I thought maybe I should have a career helping hoarders.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
that's the kind of stuff that TV show to me is attractive, because I'm like, I could do that. I don't know if I could deal. I would need a psychologist there too, but I could do that. That's the that's the kind of chaos that I like to organize.
Mhm.
And I've had that always. And so when I realized that I could make a career out of that, I was flying. I was suddenly successful in so much. And I also learned that this is about me seeing things and connecting dots that earlier and quicker than others do, and being able to articulate that and bringing calm to situations.
Yeah.
As I started to do more of that, I started to realize that I didn't need to ask anybody's approval to go and look, finagle my way into meetings and sessions and workshops. And then I would start to make connections and start making my case. So yeah, it was a natural growth. And so when I left corporate, I said, that's what I want to do. For me, the joy comes in from, if I do my job well, everybody goes home calmer and happier and has time to be with their kids and time to be a fun partner, or time for their hobbies. And I think that's so important. My main frustration with work was doing the same work several times because people weren't talking. And I love life. So I'm very busy outside work too. And I love having energy for that. And my most frustrating days in my life have been the episodes where I didn't have the energy for that because work was a mess, and it doesn't have to be.
I love what you're saying because I think that is so true. I love these brilliant visionaries that they have so many ideas. I almost feel bad for them because I can see, smoke coming out of their ears as they're like a little bubbles popping all around them. And yet they, like you said, they're not connecting the dots as to how to make any of those ideas work. And then we come in and we're like, okay, you give me all of this, and I'm going to put it in a workflow. I'm going to put it in a nice streamlined path for you. And then we're going to kick out the things that don't fit, and we're going to tweak the things that aren't fitting quite right and put them where they belong. And then ideally the goal is for them to be like, oh, thank you. Like, you just want that sigh of relief at the end. So I totally resonate with that because that's also my goal. I work with smaller entrepreneurs. They've achieved success, but they're like ready to level up, and they're not quite at the level of like, large teams or whatever. What's the difference that you've noticed between entrepreneurs that are doing a startup company that are really ambitious, right? And they're ready to dive in versus somebody who's been doing this for a while. They've got a team of 25 people. Is it similar chaos? Do you have the same process for both?
Yes, I think the solutions are similar, although the problems are not the same. They're at a different scale. I tend to find myself in situations where I support clients who have larger organizations or larger teams. I also used to do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and I occasionally still do that if it suits me, because I think I can teach people these tools at a smaller scale to use at an individual level, to even use for yourself as a professional to plot your career, or as solopreneurs to take their business to the next level. And I'm interested in helping people like that. And so then there's a balance in how does that work. So I'm attracted to that because I'm attracted to helping as many people as I can. And I think it's so simple, right? Because I can see it.
Right.
So I'd love to then give that. So yeah, I think it's the same for larger organizations. There is much more around the people and team engagement, which is also the more labor intensive part.
Yeah.
And so that's where proper consulting comes in. Otherwise, it's more in the form of masterclasses or teaching, because I think people can take some of the stuff away themselves and deploy it, right, with much less.
What are some of the specific skills that you're teaching these? You're teaching the leaders, or you're working with the whole team?
I teach the leaders, but that it inevitably usually means I'm also working with the teams. I think that if you're working in collaboration or in larger organizations, everybody has a certain level of leadership. There is very few people all the way at the bottom of the rank who are literally only steered. And so it goes wider. The basic principles of it is around panic to power. So how in moments where you feel like you're on the hamster wheel, and you keep going around and you know you're expending lots of energy, but not making progress and the wheel's not right, how do you get off? So that's one. Then the second thing I do a lot of work around is what I call the ripple effect of leadership, because even in those moments of panic, you can immediately start engaging people around you, and there's ways of getting help that do not sound like asking for help, but are opening the door for people to engage with you from within their own expertise and what they have to offer and step in as they see you moving. So I do a lot of work around that piece. And then the third piece is where a big chunk of the meat sits, which is around what are some of the practical tools that you can pragmatically deploy in the way you work, that make sure that every time some unexpected come on your path or you get a curveball, you're not thrown out of whack every time. You catch it, you look at it, you say, not now, and it goes away. Or you say, actually, all right, slight course correction, keep going.
Yeah.
And there is some, and that's largely around decision-making discipline, some risk management, and the way you communicate your intentions and your goals and your decision making with those who also have a role to play in that. And whether that's your partners or your suppliers or anybody else, it's still the same. If you need to bring people along in what you are trying to achieve, it needs to be communicatable and it needs to be clear what you're set out to achieve and what your intentions are.
I love that. Okay, so let me ask you, I'm curious, where do you find leaders giving you the biggest pushback? Like at which of those skills or at which point in the process do you find people being like, nope, you're pushing me too far out of my comfort zone. I like communicating this way. I don't want to communicate that way. I like responding this way. I don't want to respond that way. Like, where is that happening? Or is there a pattern, or is it just depends on the personality?
I think it's largely concentrated in two or three areas, and the third depends a little bit on the culture of the organization, or because I work internationally where I work. The first one is about what matters. If you start that conversation about what really matters, if you're telling me this is your goal, why are you also doing all this? And why are you trying to monitor this piece of information and this channel and these developments and trying to soak it all up? Because the pushback is usually everything matters.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
So
And it's not necessarily pushback, because I don't see it as pushback, because they honestly believe that. And that's the value of doing some proper work. If it's on the back of an envelope or whiteboard, I don't care if you spreadsheet, but you can't do all that up here.
yeah.
Because then all the biases get applied. If you need to take it out of your head and talk somebody through or work it with a team and start writing it down, you have a chance that all these biases start to impact that less. So I don't know if that's pushback, but that's usually a major hurdle.
Yeah.
And a lot of work around that. I also advocate that you really use your eyes and your observation skills to see who in those moments is able to take something on. And it might not be the person with the job title. It might be somebody else. So use what you have in those moments. And some people find that really hard to create that freedom, because in some cultures and in some organizations it's so ingrained that is deserved, that is
Right.
the
Things
world
happen
is
in certain
changing.
order. Right. No, I love that. So what I'm hearing is number one, prioritizing is so important, right? Helping them prioritize. And then you pointed out, and I think this is so true. And I love the sailing idea of like moving the sail to work with the wind, right? Who is available to do it now? So just in a recent hire that we had, I hired a VA for one of my clients, having no idea that she had a skill set that he needed. And I'm sitting here trying to find somebody who can do this other skill set. And I happened to mention to her off the cuff, and she's like, "Oh, I can do that." And I'm like, job description goes out the window. If you can do this skill set, it's yours, baby. And we just, rewrote the whole thing. And so I love that you said that. I think that that is something that some people can implement in their business. They don't necessarily think to. So moving
Yeah.
seats and whatnot.
And it usually makes people excited because it gives them the ability to do something else or do something more. It keeps their job excited. And
Yeah. And it makes them feel valued. I think above all, don't we all want to feel valued no matter what level you are in the hierarchy, right? You want to know you're valued. And if you feel valued, you're more than likely going to do 10 times more than is asked of you because you know that someone's going to be like, "Hey, thanks. I appreciate that." So many good things. A lot of what you're saying too, is I'm hearing is we have to set aside ego. Those of us who own the business, who are in the leadership team, need to set aside ego and just work with our team, not talk to our team, which is a big shift for a lot of
yeah.
people.
Yes, and it's not actually something I run into so much. It's something I worked with extensively. But the thing is that if you're willing to admit that you need some help and enlist help, you're already there. So people who are swimming around in that space,
Mhm.
they are usually not the lead I work with. There might be some in the team, right? As and potentially part of the problem.
Yeah.
Because that, yeah, if you manage your job and your people interactions from your ego, that's not an open, empowered, focused organization. Then there is games being played, and it's seldom with the best target of the company at hand. I do see emotional attachment, right? People being attached to their baby and the way they've always done it and the way they know. And to me, that's not ego. That's totally understandable.
Mhm.
And it sometimes may look like ego because of the vocabulary used, but I often, if you peel a little, you realize that it's just attachment to and fear of the unknown, and or
Yeah.
maybe not even ever having seen it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point too, especially as entrepreneurs and they level up. Every time we get to that level up, we have to go through that experience of letting go of something that we've worked so hard on, maybe. But there's always fear of the unknown. Gosh, always fear of the unknown because we don't know, right? So I love it. So before we close up, I want you to tell everybody where they can find you, but what is one last piece of advice that you would leave my listeners with? So let's say we're talking to entrepreneurs who have small teams, they're plateauing, and they need to know what's the next step for their role as a leader that they need to take to break through.
Yeah. I think particularly as a business owner, if you say that you're ready to make the next step, but you're not sure what it looks like, you get a lot of advice and it comes from everybody's own perspective. So I and it goes back to that first point of how do you prioritize, right? Because we try to hold on to everything. So I think two very simple questions to start with, to start weeding through, okay, should I at least investigate and keep on my list to consider and what not, is why now and says who.
Mhm.
Why now is about, okay, is there opportunities because there's technological developments or there's other things? So is there a thing that drives why I want to go for this now? Is actually hanging at this plateau for a year and really getting it to a point where I can wait for this kind of opportunity maybe better? Or is the plateau also really like, okay, if is now the time where I have the capacity to make the jump?
Okay.
Next year I have to do college visits with my kids, and I'll be, I have no extra time, and I don't know, whatever the reason is. So why now? Does that have a solid answer, or is the why now maybe only relevant to some of the things you're considering, and are the others less time constrained and hence maybe don't need to happen now? And this says who, it's amazing how many things we take on as shoulds without really filtering why. Personally, I have a lot of shoulds perpetually on my list that, if I really think about it, is attached to nameless faces. They or them said
Mhm.
or thought, or I think they or them expect me to, which is not a good reason, particularly if it's your business. So does it come from an authority figure? Have you been working with a coach or somebody who's been doing this before? Is it your partner who says, okay, I'm in a stable place in my career. So we can do this now, but next year or 2 years, I want the freedom to work less or do something else. So
Right.
where does this come from, and does it matter to you, or is it coming from for instance, an authority figure? So is it at least worth looking into if it matters to you enough to keep it on? And I think if you just make some columns and start putting stuff in, that's a really good way to start making some shifts in everything that you could do as a next step to, okay, maybe it's more in this space.
I love that. Two simple questions that are wicked powerful. I mean, I love that. I'm actually going to go back and have to do that a little bit myself. I'm going to transition myself right now. And this says who, I laugh because there are so many opinions. And I'm like, but they're just somebody's opinion, right? It's not necessarily what's best for me. It's just their opinion of what they would do if they were in my shoes. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. So tell everyone, how can they find you and how can they work with you?
Yes, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So that's where the easiest place to find me. And my first name is my LinkedIn link. So it's, if you type in Maartje, you'll find me. There's only two others in the US and they're equally fabulous, but they do other stuff. So you're not going to get too lost, I would say. And then you can also find more information on the chaosgamesspeaker.com. So that's my website, and it's being expanded as we are. So there should be a toolkit and resources on there shortly.
And I'll put all the links in the show notes for everybody. Maartje, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed this conversation. You gave me some food for thought, some things to think about, not just for myself, but also for my clients. So I appreciate your nuggets of wisdom.
Thank you. I enjoyed it very much too.
All right, y'all heard it here. Go out and ask the questions, why now and who says, and then make your plans and take action.